We are going to end our migration through migration by taking a look at some concepts and terms that I've not yet covered, but nevertheless are very important terms and concepts. Here's what they are. Chain migration, family reunification, remittances, ethnic enclaves, brain drain, that one rhymes, undocumented immigrants, and guest workers, also known as Gastarbeiters. Chain migration, of course, is a term that's been thrown around a lot in the United States over the last several years. I want you to understand it from a social science perspective. Here's what it is. This is a migration of people who are either related to or of the same ethnic group of an original immigrant. What ends up happening is this. A person migrates, let's say, to the United States from a foreign country. When they do that, once they establish themselves, they may very well send for their family members to come and join them. Now, if this is done legally, in other words, the person comes here, whether they came here legally or not, when they're here, if they're established, they either become an American citizen or else they establish residency in the United States, they can apply for what's known as family reunification, which is an actual legal thing. It takes several years. It's a legal process. But once that person has established themselves, they can request that their family members be allowed to join them. Usually it's one at a time. It's not the entire family coming at once, but it's a legal process. Many people come to the United States as immigrants, then will turn around and they will send what's known as remittances, which is payments back to their home country. Now, not to the country, but to their families in that original home country. This is because many people who enter the United States retain very strong feelings, allegiances, and ties to their original home country. It could very well be, as you can see in that photograph, that the types of jobs that people are doing are very tough jobs and very low-wage jobs. Nevertheless, they are required in a way culturally to send money back to their families because their families may very well view what they're doing as living in the land of milk and honey, living in the promised land, in a land that the streets are paved with gold. And as a result of that, even though they may not be making a lot of money, they nevertheless are kind of culturally required to continue to help support their own family back in their host country or their home country. Take a look at this. You can see here the world's top remittance recipients: India, China, Mexico, Philippines. That really does not change very often. A lot of that's coming from the United States. Egypt, this is coming from places in the Middle East mostly, as is Nigeria. Pakistan, kind of all over the world in a lot of ways. Vietnam, of course, mostly from the United States. Bangladesh, a lot of that from the United States. Ukraine, kind of an unusual thing. These Ukrainians are moving into Russia mostly to work in things like the oil industry and natural gas. Top remittances by amount. Now notice it says, in absolute value terms, India and China are the largest beneficiaries of remittances, receiving over a quarter of the global remittances. And Mexico also receives quite a large amount. But you can see other countries. Vietnam, critically important for Vietnam because Vietnam is not a large country in terms of its economy. The Philippines also. Top remittance recipients in terms of percentage of gross domestic product. Well, now it kind of changes. Notice Mexico obviously is a big economy, so those remittances are not making up a vast amount of the economy, nor in China or India. But in some of these other places, it's a huge amount of the economy. And of course, the outflows of remittances, the United States, number one, Saudi Arabia because of the oil industry, Switzerland, Germany, Russia, this is also because of the oil industry. So you can see some of these countries and where money is coming from. So during the pandemic, at the front end of the pandemic, you can see what happened. And that was that remittances dropped significantly. But it didn't take very long before remittances went back up to what they were, or nearly what they were before that, because people began to go back to work, as you recall, during the pandemic. Ethnic enclaves are areas dominated by a single, generally newly arrived immigrant group. This means first or second generation of immigrants. The reason people locate in ethnic enclaves, places in a city that's mostly one ethnic group, is because of this. New immigrants, if English is not their first language, in many cases, they adjust easier if they're around people who are like them. So, for example, the area they move in, the people speak their language, eat the types of food that they're used to eating, practice the same religion that they're used to practicing. It makes for an easier adjustment into the dominant society over time. This is Little Italy in New York and the very famous DePaulo's, which is in Little Italy. And if you look over here, you can see it says Prodotti tipici regionali della gastronomia italiana, which is just simply this. This is typical regional food products of Italy. And if you go inside, there's Lou, and Lou is in there. Lou's family was the one who started this. Lou's in there telling you about Italian cheeses, and he's glad to do it. Right down the street from Little Italy in New York is Chinatown. I mean, take a look. Can you see the writing? And of course, this allows for people to adjust by having their own foods. Kind of making you hungry, huh? K-Town or Koreatown in Los Angeles. You know, thriving food scene happening there. Look at that delicious stuff. If you live in Orange County, as you might because you're taking a class at Santa Ana College, Little Saigon, which is a Vietnamese community in Garden Grove. You're probably familiar with Lee's sandwiches. Why did they have French baguettes? Because, of course, the French controlled Southeast Asia for a long time, and the foods melded together. You can look at the sandwiches over here on the right-hand side. I can't say any of those Vietnamese names, but the combination, the vegetarian, you know, the special combination, the grilled chicken, and you can see the Vietnamese names down below because many people there speak Vietnamese. Brain drain is this. This is the loss of highly skilled, talented, and educated people from one country, usually a poor country, to another country, usually a richer country, and this is largely for economic opportunity. Think things like nurses from the Philippines, doctors from South Asia, Middle Eastern, South Asian, East Asian engineers coming to the United States. This is also known as human capital flight. Capital like money, only it's human beings. This is the emigration and immigration of individuals with specific top-end skills, abilities, and or education. And the United States is a great recipient of this. We get lots and lots of people who come here to work in our top-end industries, think Silicon Valley, and they come from other countries to take those jobs. You know who that is? Albert Einstein. Now, of course, Albert Einstein was one of the great brain drains in history because he came as a German Jew to the United States. So undocumented immigrants are people who reside in a country without the proper legal documents. Well, many of these people cross the border. I think people in the United States generally see this as the southern border of the United States in one way or another. Nevertheless, they also arrive on airplanes and they arrive on legal student visas or legal tourist visas, and they just never leave. But about 3/4 of Americans, according to Pew Research Center, say undocumented immigrants mostly fill jobs U.S. citizens do not want. Take a look at the top up here. You can see that, right? You can see over here. And if you look down here, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It seems to be the majority of Americans see immigrants coming in, undocumented immigrants coming in and taking jobs that mostly Americans don't want to have. Unauthorized immigrants account for nearly 1/10 of all U.S. workers in food industries. And legal and unauthorized immigrants make up a significant share of workers in some other industries, agriculture, construction. I think we know this living in California. And legal and unauthorized immigrants make up a significant share of workers in some other occupations. Farming, obviously, construction, production, services, transportation. Of course, in this country, we have a great debate that's gone on for a very long time about immigration. Some people are very much for immigration, and other people are very much against immigration of any sort. One of the ways to solve that might be to do what many European countries did, which is create a guest worker program. These are people who are invited by the host country to come in and reside and work legally, especially in job markets that lack workers, whether that's high-end or low-end jobs. In Europe, these people are oftentimes referred to as Gastarbeiters, which is the German word for guest workers, because In the 1960s and 1970s, there began to be a lot of people coming into, especially Germany, from Turkey, Italy, and the former Yugoslavia to take jobs as the economy got very hot in the post-World War II era. And because Germans didn't have a lot of children, they needed workers. And they chose to invite people to come in and take those jobs. Perhaps in the United States, I know this can get me in trouble, but perhaps in the United States, we should consider something like this for people who are here who are undocumented. Because let's face it, as we just saw, most Americans feel that many of those immigrants are taking jobs that Americans don't really want anyway.